One of the most attractive features of the new 12-team college football playoff is the fact that any team, despite a slow start to the season, can have an opportunity to get back into the playoff race. I think back to a team like 2016 USC. They start the season 1-3. All of a sudden, Sam Darnold steps in at quarterback. They completely change their season. They rip off 8 straight wins and finish as the 9th team in the country, but their season ends there. They go to the Rose Bowl, they beat Penn State, and everybody is just sits there to wonder what could have been if they would have been included in the postseason. That's what I want to talk about today. Those potential teams that have been dinged with a bad loss or a couple losses that can still sneak in and get a backdoor playoff spot. And so we'll look at first the perceived playoff threats. These are the teams in each conference, the ACC, Big 10, Big 12, SEC, and of course the group of 5 that I think the general public still perceives as a big threat to make the college football playoff and to be a team that factors into the race down the stretch. And now, looking at this list, these are the teams that won't be talked about in this video because they're the teams that are still perceived to be threats. But let's talk about the backdoor college football playoff teams. The first backdoor playoff team is LSU. Now, although this could be somewhat controversial for a number of reasons, there's probably quite a few people out there that haven't sold their LSU stock yet and think they're still a playoff contender, which is great. But the majority of the people I see and the opinions I see out there is that LSU's cooked. They're not going to make the playoffs this year. They have no chance. People selling their LSU stock after their game against USC just one game into the season. And I'm here to tell you that I think they're a serious threat to be a backdoor playoff team, and they could end up being comfortably in a playoff spot with how their schedule sets up down the stretch. Now, they're underdogs to Ole Miss right now. People are expecting LSU to take their second loss of the season this weekend. They've still got games against Alabama, Oklahoma, and Texas A&M on the horizon, all top 25 teams after that game. So a lot of people are probably looking at LSU and saying, oh, they're going to lose 4 or 5 games. They're cooked. But I'm here to tell you, I really think LSU's got a shot to make something happen. The first thing I really like is the fact that they get their 3 remaining biggest games all at home: Ole Miss, Alabama, and Oklahoma. They host all 3 of those games. They get to play Vanderbilt down the stretch. However, Vanderbilt, all due respect to them, they're not a joke this season like they usually are. And then Arkansas and Florida are 2 of the more desirable SEC battles you would want to have on there. That game at Texas A&M going to be a pretty tough test on the road. But LSU they have such a tough strength of schedule that they can actually afford to lose 3 games and I think still be a college football playoff team. And I look at this LSU team, the key factors here, Garrett Nussmeier is improving. And I think throughout the season, he's becoming more comfortable with this LSU team. And we've already seen them in a position where they looked like they had a lapse, and then they came out and won still against South Carolina. The defense is looking to find their footing, and I think they are. Blake Baker sinking his teeth fully into this unit. And so for that reason, I think LSU's in a good spot. And I think if they beat Ole Miss, they'll have enough momentum that they can get in with that resume at 9-3. Let's get a little bit more out there, though. Backdoor team number 2 would be Louisville. Louisville, a team that has 2 losses already in the season. They're 3-2 after a loss to SMU last week. They're now 3-2 and 1-1 in conference play, so they have a conference loss, unlike LSU. But I really think the Cardinal could be a backdoor playoff team this season. They play Miami and Clemson later this season, so if they're up to the task, they'll have an opportunity to beat 2 of the ACC's top contenders. I think the SMU team that beat them last week is playing better than almost any team in the ACC. I'd say maybe Clemson's playing a little bit better than them right now. But you look at their schedule outside of that, Stanford, Pitt, Boston College, Virginia, those should all be winnable games for Louisville. And I really buy into the fact that if Louisville can split Miami and Clemson, they'll have an opportunity to make the ACC title game because of how chaotic and hectic things are looking in there right now. So the fact that they get a crack at Miami and Clemson, the fact that Notre Dame lost non-conference, and the fact that both of their losses were really competitive, it wasn't like we just saw this Louisville team completely collapse and fall apart. Those are all things that I really like when I'm looking at this Louisville team. So they're a team that I think could get back in this race, especially with how high I was on them in the offseason and how attractive they looked on paper. Backdoor team number 3 is going to be West Virginia. The Mountaineers at 3-2 on the season. They've taken 2 losses, but both in the non-conference. So they're actually 2-0 in Big 12 play. You have to stretch the imagination a lot less for West Virginia to be a team you consider to be a threat here. Look at the fact that their next 2 games are massive. They host Iowa State and Kansas State, 2 of the perceived top Big 12 contenders right now. If they can come out on top of those games with the excellent home field advantage they have, all of a sudden we're talking about a pretty serious West Virginia team. They also lost lost by blowing a big lead to Pitt. Their other game was against a really good Penn State team. So I don't think any lower of this West Virginia team than I thought in the offseason. I think they're still an excellent squad. I love the fact that they have those 0 conference losses and host those contenders, and I really think this offense is starting to find their rhythm down the stretch. However, Penn State was just an excellent defensive team, so it might not have even been that they were any worse at the start of the season. And then outside of that, obviously tough tests at Arizona and Texas Tech, but they're in a position with 0 conference losses that, sure, if they lose one of those, or even if they lose 2 of those, there's still a path where they can make the Big 12 title game, get that Big 12 playoff spot. And it's a team I really buy as one that could turn around and late in the season find a way to get into the playoff mix. We talked about a team with 1 loss and a team with 2 losses. What about a team with 3 losses? Virginia Tech is backdoor playoff team number 4. 3-3 right now, 1-1 in conference play. They lost on the Hail Mary to Miami. What if Virginia Tech is actually a really good team that lost on a Hail Mary or a failed Hail Mary versus Miami, lost in overtime to a Vanderbilt team that, alert, is actually really good this season and just beat Alabama? All of a sudden those losses don't look as bad. The other one, a close loss to a good Rutgers squad as well. So Virginia Tech, optically, I think their losses have aged pretty well. And you look at conference play, if they're playing as well as we think they are right now, they can 100% win out down the stretch and win these games. They've got a huge critical game at home versus Clemson that they would have to find a way to win. That's easily the toughest one remaining. But Virginia Tech, I think, could be favored in all of those other 5 games, and it only requires one real leap in logic for them to be back into the playoff hunt. Obviously, I think you're looking at a team that has to basically win out from here in order to be in the mix, but the fact that they only have 1 conference loss means maybe they could take 1 more and still find a way into the playoff race. I think they're playing their best football right now. The fact they host Clemson is great, and just overall, it's really just a hindsight thing. The losses they've taken that were looked at as really bad aren't as bad anymore. But let's get to the group of 5 a little bit. Backdoor team number 5 is going to be Tulane. Tulane, a team that some people have written off just because they've seen, oh, Tulane has 2 losses. They're obviously not the top group of 5 contender. That's going to be Army or Navy or Boise State. But Tulane's 2 losses are to Kansas State and Oklahoma, both still top 20 teams. And Kansas State, a team that could factor in the Big 12 title race. Oklahoma in the SEC, still going to be respected as an opponent, even if they're inflicted with some losses in a deep SEC this year. But you look at Tulane's schedule, I mean, they don't really play anyone that I think can rival them until those late matchups against Navy and against Memphis. And you don't want to overlook anything. I think North Texas is having a good season, but with the way John Summerall's team has played and looked, I don't think they're going to get a test from any of these teams. They dropped 70 points in their last game. They've been blowing teams out. They have another high-quality win over Louisiana, and I think those 2 losses can 100% be overlooked if those 2 teams that beat them are in good standing at the end of the season. And the fact that they host Memphis is really big late in the season. It's a Tulane team that probably needs to win out, but with an American Conference title win and 2 losses to 2 really good teams, I think that you can't keep them out as the top group of 5 team, especially if some of those other group of 5 teams falter. Finally, backdoor team number 6 is going to be Missouri. People watched on the national stage as they got clobbered by Texas A&M, and I think a lot of people in that moment just wrote off Missouri as a serious threat to make a playoff run or to really do anything of note this season. But it's a Texas A&M team that is playing pretty well right now. They got Wegman back. They were at home, a rowdy environment, and Missouri just looking stagnant, falling flat out of the gate. Yeah, they've looked pretty flat and pretty bad, but I think they've got an opportunity to right the wrongs they have in these next couple of weeks. They've got a game at UMass. They host Auburn. Those are a couple get-right games for Missouri, and if all of a sudden they can rack up a couple wins there, look at the rest of that schedule. They obviously have a game at Alabama, but they host an Oklahoma team that is equally as dysfunctional offensively as Missouri is and hasn't looked like they're world beaters. In fact, Missouri might end up being favored in that game. 2 road games, but they're against South Carolina and Mississippi State, both very winnable games. And then they end the season versus Arkansas at home, another winnable game. If they can win these next 2, and let's say they lose to Bama, we're staring down the barrel and realizing, Missouri might be favored in each of their last 4 games, which would result in a 10-2 season and probably a team that's going to be in the playoff. And so you look at Missouri as a backdoor team, I think it's very, very possible. And even if Missouri isn't that great and the offensive issues are never fully ironed out, they could totally make it happen. So outside of Bama, a workable schedule, a little bit of blind faith, but I do think that Missouri has a good coaching staff, and as a result, I have all the more reason to have faith in this Missouri squad. But that does it for this video. Thank you for watching. As usual, if you enjoyed the video, go ahead, like, comment, subscribe, do all the good stuff. Let me know down in the comments what other teams that have 1, 2, maybe 3 losses do you think could be a backdoor playoff threat late in the season that nobody's talking about right now. And hope you enjoyed the video. I will be dropping probably 2 more long-form videos this week. Obviously going to do the weekly predictions on Thursday again, as usual. So I appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later this week.